Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the effect of migrants that have a very strong in-group preference, this is migrants to the West, and how they come not to share, not to give, not to build, not to contribute, but simply to enrich their, their family or their village, their tribe, or their genetic brethren, and they're not here to do anything else in the West. They've come to loot whatever they can, and the sole purpose of coming to the West is to get the fuck out of India, which they nearly all do, or Pakistan, or the subcontinent generally, and then come and parasite off the rich Western economy that they've contributed nothing to. This whole economy, society, all the things that make the West an attractive place to come to was all built by Western people. None of it was built by these people who come now to parasite at the invitation of the globalists, I hasten to add here. But I just want to use a couple of examples, and they're stark reminders of just how we in the West are getting fleeced by not only the literate peasants that come in, but by the people who come in who've got money and all sorts of, because their defrauding activity is I think infinitely greater, certainly the minimum the same, but infinitely greater, I think, than just having these peasants coming in. Now there was a pie shop. This is a guy makes pies and sells them in one of the nearby to where I live. Seemed to be, from what I could tell, quite a good business. He's about my age, early 60s, and he's got two sons, and he's tried to sort of get them to, one of them at least, to take over the business, but they're not interested. I don't know what they're doing actually, but anyway, so he decides he's going to sell, and so he puts the place up for sale. Now, whether he doesn't get any offers or he doesn't get an offer he wants or something like that, he eventually sells it to these Indians, and he employs, I don't know, with casuals and so on, he probably employs 10 or more people, all local people from the local area, all white, by the way. And so the Indian buys it, and I was talking to him, and he said that the payment was made, to buy the business, was made from some Indian offshore finance company, off in India or somewhere offshore. It wasn't like from a local bank or anything like that. So that he sort of viewed that as, he's not a sophisticated businessman, so he mentioned that to me, and I didn't say anything, but I thought it was, it straight away, my ears pricked up because I knew what was going on. Now, the Indian, it's an Indian woman who fronts it, who has lived in England for a while, given the accent, and she fancies herself as a real elite patrician. I'm a top of I'm a heavy hitter, I'm a kick-ass, and talks to you in that sort of condescending, officious manner that upper class Indians often do. And she anyway, I'm sure she's just fronting it, but anyway, they got rid of all the white people, and there's only Indians there now, all Indians, wall-to-wall Indians. There's not a single white person working. So all the white people, the local white people, lost their jobs. Now, they were casual jobs, school kids, that sort of thing. There was a couple of older people there and a part-time, and I think those jobs would have been important to them, making ends meet and all that sort of thing. But anyway, they're all gone, and there's all Indians there. And they're all peasants, by the way. They're not upper class Indians or anything, far from it. They're all peasants to do the donkey work in this fucking pie, because you got to turn up at 4 a.m. to cook all the pies and things like that. So now here's a few things to consider as we look at this. Firstly, they've got the money to buy it. The money's being brought in from offshore, so that'll be a loan to a subsidiary company that's been set up in Australia. That loan has to be paid back. The company that loans the money in India can add, management fees and all sorts of costs and other stuff on top of that. So they'll make sure that the local pie shop, never turns a profit, and therefore never pays any tax. Now, I checked with the guy. He pays a decent amount of tax each year. So, firstly, the business doesn't pay any tax. The local people have lost their jobs. The Indians that are in there are all packed into one small compact house that is owned by the same company that loaned the money to buy the business, the offshore Indian company. So they pack all these Indians. So these Indians are brought in supposedly as skilled labour, which they're not. They're just illiterate, rural peasants. They're brought into work for slave labour wages. Their wages, ostensibly, part of their wages is lodging in the house. So they're being bunked up, four to a room, and they eat from the pie shop, so they're fed through there. That's all packaged up as an income, but their income now comes under the threshold of taxable income. So the employees that were there that were paying tax have lost their jobs. All the Indian employees are not paying tax. The pie shop doesn't pay any tax. They're using all sorts of tax loopholes and tax minimisation schemes elsewhere. The people who, the woman, and she's got like an offsider working there. I don't know what the deal is, but I'd imagine they're getting less than taxable income, and everything else is packaged up in kind, such as accommodation or use of a vehicle or whatever the case may be. So, all the clothes they're wearing are Indian clothes. So I imagine clothes are just being shipped in or posted in. So they're able to not only deny 10 plus jobs to local people, but they're able to avoid paying a penny of tax at any level in any way, and all the profits are being sent offshore to India for just a small elite group of Brahmins to make windfall profits at the other end. So how has this helped Australia one bit? Now you say, well, they paid money to the guy to sell his business. All right then. Well, that's a one-off. After that, zero benefit to Australia, to Australian workers, Australian citizens, the Australian taxpayer. Nothing in it from that point onwards. Now, this is given the amount of cash type businesses and other businesses that Indians buy, and even when they get franchises, typically the master franchise holder has been purchased by an offshore Indian company as well. You see in also computer services, things like that, the amount of Indians will buy a company in Australia, then all the jobs will be transferred off to India for IT support and coding and things like that. So the cost to Australia is huge. Not only, again, there's no tax being paid, but these people are sharing whatever benefit they get strictly amongst their tribe and genetic brethren and family members. Nothing is being spent outside of it. They can possibly avoid it. Now, in addition, that the guy hung around as a sort of like a consultant, if you like, for the pie shop, but all the suppliers he had for raw materials like pastry and stuff like that. All those suppliers now have lost the business. All the suppliers gone to other Indian companies now. So Indian companies have been set up to supply them. So that's and a lot of that they try and source from India as well. So local suppliers are cut out. And it's kept within the Indian genetic community. So these are examples of how what a price Australia or the West generally, what a price the West pays for having these sort of people come in. Now, if you get somebody from Europe, Western Europe buys a pie shop or buys a business, they want to contribute, build, integrate, be part of the thing. Where are you getting your stuff from? Okay, I'll get it from there too. There's no desire, I have to change it so it's another Frenchman gets it or another English guy. That thought doesn't even cross their mind. They're here to be part of the local society. And so, Western people think that way. But these Asians, Indians, Chinese, they don't think that way. They don't think that way at all. They're here to loot and to parasite and to take not to give and share and contribute. Now, there must be some that do. In the overall scheme of things, given there's millions of them here, there must be some that want to contribute. But I would argue hardly any. And again, whether it's Chinese probably aren't quite as bad as the Indians, but bad enough. And then you look at the other groups, the Filipinos probably aren't quite as bad, although they still do it. Now the only ones, like say when the Russians arrived, a lot of Russians arrived couldn't speak a word of English. So they were set up in businesses, such as corner stores or takeout food shops, that sort of thing. And the Russian mafia would loan them money, but they had to pay it back at like 25% interest. So they had to work night and day, 7 days a week. The whole family had to be in there, and they had to scrounge every penny that they could to be. And they lived in if not squalid, certainly humble conditions. But once they had paid that back, that they then had an extremely viable business that they owned, which they could then sell or continue to run and do quite well out of. So the Russians weren't as fixated with offshore loans and tax advice. Not that they didn't do it, they did, but they weren't fixated that it had to be only Russians benefited and so on. The reason that the Russian mafia controlled the loans for buying businesses, these people had, had really no material skills in the West. They couldn't speak any English or hardly anything, and there's no way they could borrow or get money anywhere other than through the mafia, the Russian mafia. So their only hope of doing all right was to really do business with the mafia, which they did. But again, ultimately, as the full circle of it went round, they ended up being contributing citizens to the local economy and society and so on. This is very different with the Indians and Chinese. Even second generation, they're quite happy to take everything they can. Third generation, fourth generation, happy to take everything they can, but they don't want to contribute a thing. And that's something that the cost of bringing these people in is huge to the West, given their non-contribution, but their constant parasiting at all levels. And it's a great cost, and one that, have you ever wondered why Western productivity keeps declining? There's reasons for it. For example, switching from manufacturing to services. Services are always less productive than manufacturing, but in measured productive output for time employed. But another one of the primary reasons, apart from illiterate peasants coming in, but they get paid almost nothing. So you could say that's an offset for low productivity. But the real price, the real reduction in productivity is these sort of businesses like this pie shop I spoke about, and many others, that whether it be petrol stations, like gasoline stations, all these sorts of things, they're only made viable by the employment of peasant Indian labor to work there. So these are the things that, if you look at it in the wider context of the economics of it all, and the social economics and the cost of that, then we can see productivity is going down the toilet because of the sort of people that have been brought to the West, and how they do business, and how they're so in-group parochial. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.